You're 55 and you want to retire at 60. That means you have 5 years to decide exactly where your income is going to be coming from and how to keep as much of it as possible. After helping hundreds of Canadians in this situation, I can tell you that the same mistakes come up again and again. Not having clarity on expenses, not having a withdrawal plan, and not having an investment plan that lines up with your future expense needs. So in today's video, we're going to go through a case study of a new client of ours that we'll call Jane, and we're going to show you the mistakes that she was about to make if she stuck to her current plan and how we were able to pivot and adjust moving forward. Jane is 55 years old, and in an ideal world, she would like to retire at 60. She was working with an advisor, but her advisor only focused on the investment side of things, so she didn't have a retirement plan built out. So she took it upon herself and put her own figures in an Excel spreadsheet, and she felt like she was in a good position to retire at 60, and if anything, she might be able to retire at 55. However, she did come to us just to make sure that her plan was solid and was just looking for that certainty that she can go ahead and retire on her schedule. So let's just jump into her situation. So while she was working, she was making $150,000 per year. In her retirement accounts, she had $850,000 in her RSPs, and her plan was to keep saving $10,000 per year into that account until she retired. She has $120,000 in her TFSA, and her plan was to keep maxing that out until retirement, so $7,000 per year. And then she also had a non-registered account for $130,000. Regarding her government pensions, she planned on taking her CPP at 60, and she would receive $911 per month at that time. And for her old age security, she would receive $891 per month, and that's if she took it at 65. Her home was worth $800,000, and she had no debt against it. Regarding her retirement expenses, she figured she would need $6,000 per month after tax, or $72,000 per year. So when we took this information and we transposed it from her Excel spreadsheet into her plan, we got to take a look at her picture. And by all accounts, everything looked really good. So this is her net worth over time. So this teal color, that's her home, keeps growing up and going up in value by about 2% per year. We have her registered accounts in blue, so her RSPs, TFSA in yellow, and non-registered account in brown. So for someone who wants to spend $70,000 per year, her plan was currently 150% funded, or over 150%. So she had lots of room to spend more, and she was leaving an estate of $4.2 million. So quite a bit of money to leave behind, especially if that's not one of your priorities. So she wanted to look at what it would look like if she retired at 55, and that changes things a little bit, but she's still very much in a good position. So now her plan is 120% funded, which is still good, over 100%, and her estate is at $2 million. So still in a really good position to be able to retire at 55 if she wanted to. But there was one crucial thing that Jane's plan was missing. Again, she wants to spend $72,000 per year, but in her Excel spreadsheet, she forgot to factor in inflation. Inflation is going to have a huge impact on your plan, especially if you have a 30-year time frame. So if she's retiring at 60 and let's say life expectancy is 90, then if you want to spend $72,000 per year, at 90, you're going to need $200,000 to be able to buy the same amount of goods, assuming inflation is at 3%. Oh, and by the way, if you're planning to retire in the next few years, I've put together a Canadian retirement withdrawal guide. It goes over how to time your retirement withdrawals, when to take CPP and OAS, and how to avoid the biggest tax mistakes I see people make. Check it out using the link in the description. So once we added inflation into the plan, now her plan wasn't looking so good anymore. So if she retired at 55, she'd be out of money at 2042. So not a good position to be in. So let's uncheck that box and look at retiring again at 60. So her plan now is 79% funded. So she is still running out of cash to fund her retirement in 2054. So that'd put her at 84 years old. So then we see this red line pop up. This is essentially saying that she's going into debt. So using the equity in her home to keep funding her lifestyle. So she's still okay. Again, she's going to have a little bit of debt by the time she reaches age 90, but she's still going to have $778,000 left as equity in her home. So okay position to be in. But again, once you add in inflation, the plan changes substantially. The other issue that Jane wasn't factoring is that her advisor today had her in a portfolio that was 100% in stocks. which is okay in the sense that this is a great way to beat inflation, because the more aggressive approach you take, the higher rate of return should be in the future, which is a good hedge against inflation. The problem once you get to the decumulation stage of life is that you're having to draw from your portfolio. And if there's a big event in the market and the markets are down 40%, well, now you're having to draw from that bucket when the markets are down. You're taking out money at a low, right? So we want to avoid that as much as possible. So if we stress test her plan, and let's just say we create a scenario where the market crashes 40%, and that happens 1 year before she retires, and it takes 5 years for the market to recover. So similar to a 2008 financial crisis event. Let's see what that would look like to Jane's plan. So now we got flashing lights here, attention required. So we see the big drop here happen in 2029. So the portfolio goes down 40%. It does recover over the next few years, but now we're running out of money in 2049, so age 79. So her portfolio is really not protecting her if there is a negative event in the market, which should go down 30, 40, even possibly 50%. So we've talked about this in the past, but you really want to build out buckets for your retirement. So the first bucket is for the short-term money that you're going to need. So we want that money to be extremely secure. So maybe 1 year's worth of income in that bucket. Again, retirement is 5 years away, so she doesn't really need anything in that first bucket just yet. The second bucket is for the midterm. So let's say from years 2 or 3 to 8 of your retirement. So again, you want these investments to be conservative because you're going to need this money relatively soon. So for Jane, retirement was 5 years away. But if we have a 8-year kind of buffer and we want that second bucket to have some conservative investments, maybe she starts putting a little bit in there to give herself a buffer if market does crash right before she retires, that she can draw on that piece without having to take money out of her portfolio while the market is down. And then lastly, we have the third bucket, which is the money she's not going to need to touch for 8+ years, and that can remain invested. So if this were to happen, again, the situation looks even worse if we go through a 40% market correction. Now, let's assume that doesn't happen, and we'll just work through a few different strategies that she can implement to improve these figures here. So right now, she's at 79% funded for retirement, and her net estate is $778,000. So a few things that we can do is we can delay out her CPP to age 70 instead of taking it at 60. So she was in relatively good health, and she actually didn't know that you could take CPP past age 60. It just seemed like all her friends were taking at 60. So she thought that was the default age to take it. So showing her the difference by pushing it out to 70. Now her retirement is 84% funded and her estate has gone up $961,000. If we do the same thing with old age security, again, she wasn't aware of that either. So pushing it out from 65 to 70 and receiving that bonus for the deferral. Keep topping up her TFSAs. We'll use the money in the non-registered account to keep doing that. And then put together a withdrawal strategy. So drawing or targeting an income of $80,000 per year in retirement. So pulling money from RSPs and non-registered account, again, between those ages of 60 to 70, because she's not going to have any government pensions coming in. So we can see what that looks like by looking at her cash flow. So we'll skip through the first few years here because she's still working. So at age 61, her first year for retirement, she doesn't have any money coming in from work, no CPP, no OAS. Registered withdrawals, $90,000, and non-registered withdrawals of $7,700. And then this is just a refund from her last year's tax return because she did an RSP contribution. So again, going back to our initial point of inflation, her expenses were $72,000 per year. Even by 2031, she's going to need $85,000 to be able to buy the same amount of goods as $72,000 buys you today. So by implementing this strategy, again, we're drawing from the registered accounts and the non-registered. And then once the non-registered is depleted, then we switch that to the TFSA. Eventually, she's forced to take the minimums from her portfolio, so her registered plans, and then we keep topping that up from additional withdrawals from her RIFs and TFSA. So the plan, again, looks a little bit better. We're still having to go into debt to meet her retirement expenses. And then the last strategy we looked at was just her home. Again, she had her home. It was quite large. She probably didn't need to have that large of a home in her 80s. So we looked at a scenario where, you know what, why don't we sell it, again, theoretically at age 80 and see what that looks like. So we see the teal color disappear here, and that money from the house proceeds goes into her non-registered account. And then we keep topping up the TFSAs from there. And now by doing that, our plan is 110% funded and we have $766,000 left as a net estate at age 90. So again, not important for her to leave an estate, but if she does live past age 90, then there's still some cash available there that she could draw on to keep meeting her expenses. So again, it's one thing to have an advisor that builds you, a retirement portfolio, but if you don't have a retirement plan to have that line up together, then again, it's not really working as in synergy, right? So as far as going back to the retirement portfolio, what we'd want to look at, again, if we were building out those buckets, she doesn't need anything in the first bucket because retirement is still 5 years away. But if we look again at her cash flow and how much she's going to need, she's going to need about $90,000 from her registered accounts in 2031, so 6 years from now, and a little bit from her non-registered. And then same thing in 2032, about $92,018. So maybe today she takes that out of her growth side of her portfolio to move to the more conservative side of things. Again, that'll just protect her if there is a market crash. Now she's got 2 years worth of payments that are secure and not tied to the market that she can draw on while the market recovers. And again, next year she can do the same thing, move this $95,000 into something more conservative and move this $23,000 into something more conservative as well. So just flowing, again, that money down from the third bucket to the second to the first as your income needs come up in retirement. And if you want to take this a step further and run your own numbers to make sure that you're on track, then check out our Atlas system. This is the exact process we use with our clients to ensure that they have certainty around every financial decision. So this is exactly how we updated Jane's plan to retire at 60 with the confidence that her money would last. But even the best plans can fall apart if too much of your retirement income is going to the CRA. That's why in this next video, I'm sharing 5 retirement tax hacks for Canadians in 25. Check it out right here.